We're going to be discussing Revelations and how to memorize Revelations by looking at the number and changing it into pictures. For example, Revelations chapter 1 is discussed about Jesus and what John sees around Jesus, but also knowing and describing what Jesus looked like. And so we're going to make a 1 into a skinny Jesus. Chapter 2 of Revelations, John is told to write what he hears and sees, and so the round part of the 2 is a head, and the arm sticking out to write down to the 7 churches. And then chapter 3, one of those churches that he writes to is Philadelphia, and so we'll make a 3 into a heart, and because Philadelphia means a city of love, and that also reminds you that he's still writing to the churches in chapter 3. Chapter 4, he's in the throne room, and he sees the throne room, around the throne room. And so 4, if you see a person sitting down, leaned over, and his elbow on his knee, and extended out there his arm. Revelations chapter 5, who's worthy to open up the scrolls, to open up the book, and then we're going to make this 5 into a big thumb, because it grabs, it says the Lamb took the scroll in his hand, so we'll make the 5 a big thumb there, and help us remember that there is something being held, which was the scroll. Chapter 6, it says the Lamb broke the scrolls, and the seals, and off the scroll, and so we have a 6 representing the seal. And back then they had seals that were made of wax, and they covered up the paper and make sure it was sealed. So that's the way we can remember chapter 6. Chapter 7, John sees a great multitude before God, and so the 7 can be half a robe, and then also the 144,000 is mentioned in chapter 7. And chapter 8, the trumpets are blown, and so we'll imagine the bottom part a trumpet, and the top part a person's head. Chapter 9, John sees the locusts coming out of the pit, and he sees the locusts having a crown on their head, and having long hair, so make the part of the 9 long hair. Chapter 10, John is told to eat a small book, and so a little book, and then he eats it. It's sweet, but then it becomes bitter. So 1 will be John, and the 0, imagine an open mouth that comes and eats the book, and it helps us remember what that chapter is about. Chapter 11, John sees the 2 witnesses that come down to earth, and they're killed, and so we can see the 2 witnesses here, and they become alive, and then the people are fearful. Chapter 12, he sees the woman who gives birth to a child. You see 1 being John, and then a 2, see a stick figure bowing over, like a woman bowing over, who gave birth and has a child. And of course, a dragon is waiting to consume the child. In chapter 13, John sees the beast coming out of the water, out of the sea, and so we'll make the 3 like waves, and then 1 would be John, and it helps us remember what that chapter is about. John chapter 14, John sees 144,000. This would be John, but also it can be 1, and then the 4 with the 4,000, which may be the 144,000. I normally don't use numbers for the pictures, but in this case, it's an exception. It's an easy way to remember. John chapter 15, John sees the singing up in heaven, and they sing the song of the Lamb and of Moses. And we see a note here, a music note. Normally music notes are the other direction, but we can make this look like a music note, help us remember. John chapter 16, the bowls of wrath are poured out on the earth. So we see 1 would be John, and the 6 would be an arm, the top part of the 6, and the round part would be the bowl. John chapter 17, John sees the scarlet. who is riding the beast. So we'll make 7 into a dress with an arm out. And women wear dresses normally in the Old Testament, so we can imagine this being part of a dress. Chapter 18, John sees this great city, Babylon, destroyed and is consumed by fire. The bottom part of the 8 would be the wall surrounding Babylon, and the top part will be smoke coming from the city. And then, of course, one will be John. John is here in Revelation chapter 19. He sees the bride, who the lamb, the bride, the wife of the lamb, the wedding, and he sees the bride of Christ. John chapter 20, we see we can make John the 2 ahead. Long part of hand is just because he's just looking at the pit. And then it says the bottomless of the pit, the dragons was pulled out of the pit. And then later on in the chapter, it talks about the wicked being thrown into the lake of fire. So you can imagine a circle being a pit and also the lake of fire. Revelation chapter 21, John sees a new Jerusalem coming out of heaven. And churches normally have steeples on top of it. So it's a place of worship. It's a place where God is at. And also it says the tabernacle in heaven. So John sees a new Jerusalem coming out of heaven. So we'll make the 1 into a steeple. The last chapter of Revelations, John chapter 22, we see 2 heads. So one will be John, and he sees Christ, who's, it says that Christ brings his reward, and that would be the present there, a reward for us Christians. And I hope this will help you memorize Revelations, and I'll be coming up with other books, and I hope you're encouraged and blessed. Thank you.